SMS Chee Hong Tat.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank members Mr. Louis Ng, Mr. Louis Chua, Mr. Leong Man Wai, and Mr. Don Wee for speaking on the bill and giving their support for the proposed amendments. Let me address their queries. Madam, ABSD trust is applicable if the residential property is transferred into a living trust on or after 9th of May 2022. This applies for both pre-existing trusts and new trusts created on or after 9th of May 2022. Now, living trusts are trusts that come into existence during the lifetime of the person who created it. Mr. Ng and Mr. Wee have asked whether ABSD trust applies where the transfer of residential property into a living trust took place before 9th of May 2022, which is the effective date of ABSD trust, and there's a subsequent appointment or distribution of the property to a beneficiary of the trust on or after 9th of May 2022. Since the transfer of residential property took place before 9th of May 2022, ABSD trust does not apply, including to a subsequent distribution of the property by the trustee to a beneficiary of the trust on or after 9th of May 2022. Madam, Mr. Chua and Mr. Leong asked why ABSD trusts and ACD trusts were not introduced earlier. Before the introduction of ABSD trusts, transfers of residential property into a trust with an identifiable beneficial owner are subject to ABSD. So the situation is not entirely as what Mr. Chua described, and certainly not what Mr. Leong said in his speech. ABSD collected for transfers into trusts where there is an identifiable beneficial owner of the property was not separately tracked before 9th of May 2022. It was instead accounted for according to the profile of the identifiable beneficial owner. So we look at the profile of the owner, the beneficial owner, to determine what is the ABSD that is due. So as I explained in my second reading speech, ABSD would not apply before 9th of May for trusts which do not have an ABSD would not apply before 9th of May for trusts which do not have an identifiable beneficial owner. And this is what the proposed changes for ABSD trusts and ACD trusts seek to address, to ensure that ABSD and ACD continue to remain relevant as property market cooling measures, irrespective of whether trusts are used or not. Trusts can be set up for different reasons, including for non-tax purposes, such as to provide for charitable giving. They can involve highly complex arrangements. Now, given the diversity and complexity of trust instruments, we decided to study the proposed changes carefully and do a thorough review so that we could achieve our policy objectives while avoiding unintended consequences. So I'm glad that all the members who have spoken agree with the proposed changes, and this will allow us to move forward to apply the new changes with effect from 9th of May in the manner which I described earlier. So it is important, I think, for us to also remember that when we implement some of these changes, we also have to bear in mind how they will fit in with our overall system of governance and rule of law. So Mr. Leong mentioned that we should sort of, if I heard him correctly, retrospectively apply some of these changes to previous transfers, previous transactions. Now, I think it would not be fair or appropriate for us to do that, to apply these changes retrospectively, because this will undermine the rule of law and it will also affect the confidence that the public and businesses have in the certainty that Singapore offers. Mr. Leong also mentioned that whether we could refund ABSD only when the creator of the trust or the settler has died. if I heard him correctly. Madam, we collect fully upfront at the point of transfer of the property into the trust if the proposed amendments are approved. That's what we will do. So we actually collect the full amount upfront, and we only refund when certain conditions are met, and you have to apply. So this actually is even better than what Mr. Leong mentioned, which is to only collect or to only refund when the creator or the settler has passed away. I think importantly, Madam, we also have to take a look at what is our overall tax and transfer system. So I do not agree with what Mr. Leong said, that our tax and our transfer system benefits the rich. That is not true. Overall, our tax and transfer system is fair and progressive. And in fact, the government has been raising asset-related taxes repeatedly. We did this in Budget 2010, 2013, 2018, and more recently in 2022. In Budget 2015 and Budget 2022, we also raised the income tax for higher income earners. So overall, our system of taxes and benefits is a fair and progressive one. It's one where everyone contributes, but those who have more will pay more, contribute more than what they receive in terms of benefits. It is a fair and progressive system. Madam, Mr. Louis Ng asked about how IRAS determines the existence of an associate relationship between parties with an oral or implied agreement or arrangement to acquire, hold, or dispose of equity interests, or to exercise votes in a property holding entity. The associate relationship Mr. Ng refers to is part of the current definition of associates under the existing ACD regime, and it is not an amendment that is being proposed in this bill. I had earlier explained that where a trustee holds equity interest for a beneficiary who is not an identifiable beneficial owner of those interests at the time of their transfer into the trust, such a beneficiary is considered an associate of the trustee in determining whether the trustee is a significant owner of the PHE. And this definition of associates will be provided for in subsidiary legislation. Now, let me briefly explain how IRAS will determine the existence of an oral or implied agreement or arrangement. Today, if ACD is payable, the grantee or grantor is required to stamp the instrument and submit to IRAS a copy of the instrument and supporting documents. These supporting documents include a declaration of associates and the equity interests in the PHE that they beneficially own. And this includes associates who are parties with an oral or implied agreement or arrangement. IRAS will conduct a thorough assessment of the documents submitted, including verifying the existence of any oral or implied agreement or arrangement using a risk-based approach. For instance, IRAS may interview the parties involved. Madam, the large majority of our taxpayers comply with stamp duty requirements. We have stringent enforcement in Singapore, and there are stiff penalties for tax evasion, whether on stamp duties or other taxes. So for people who are thinking of circumventing the rules, please don't, because there will be a price to pay when you are caught. Mr. Donwee asks how much more the new stamp duties are expected to contribute to government revenue. Mr. Louis Chua also alluded to this in his speech. ABSD trusts, ACD trusts, and the imposition of stamp duty on the renunciation of a trust property are not intended to be wealth taxes or revenue-raising measures. Rather, they are part of our residential property market cooling measures. We are unable to determine at this juncture the revenue that will be raised from ABSD trusts, ACD trusts, and the stamp duty on the renunciation of a trust property, as this depends on the extent to which individuals will transfer property or equity interest in PHEs into living trusts in future. Mr. Wee asks whether the amendments will apply to a trust created overseas. These amendments are applicable to two groups of instruments. First, an instrument executed in Singapore. Second, an instrument executed outside of Singapore relating to property situated in Singapore. and is received in Singapore. So this is regardless of whether the trust is created locally or overseas. Mr. Chua asked whether the Ministry of Finance is reviewing the ABSD remission conditions for housing developers. Madam, the Ministry answered a parliamentary question on this in November 2021, and our position remains the same. The 3- and 5-year deadlines for licensed and non-licensed developers to sell their developments remain relevant to ensure a timely sale of such units to the market instead of keeping them for future sale for possibly higher prices. The deadlines also encourage developers to bid for residential land prudently. The vast majority of developers are able to meet these deadlines. Mr. Chua also asked if the government would consider a move similar to what was done in New South Wales, Australia, to replace the upfront stamp duty with an annual property tax for first-time home buyers who purchase properties below a certain amount. In this case, it was Australian dollars 1.5 million. So according to reports from the New South Wales government, the home ownership rate had declined for each generation since the baby boomers. For example, 60% of people born between 1942 and 1951 owned homes by age 25 to 34. This dropped by 15 percentage points to 45% for those born between 1982 to 1991. So the context in Singapore is different. Our home ownership rates remain high. About 90% of Singaporean families own their own homes. And there's no ABSD for Singaporeans who are buying their first residential property. Importantly, we have good quality public housing, which caters to the housing needs of the large majority of our first-time buyers, with subsidies and grants, and with mortgage financing provided from HDB. Our public housing, HDB flats, remain affordable for first-time home buyers. Close to 90% of first-time families who bought their flats this year serviced their housing loans fully using CPF, with no cash payments. So it's important for us to bear in mind the differences in our context and our situation when we consider whether we want to adopt ideas and practices from overseas jurisdictions. Their policies are designed to tackle their challenges, which may not be the same as what we face in Singapore. Finally, Mr. Wee asked about the expected impact on Singapore as a wealth management hub. ABSD or ACD already apply to purchases of residential properties in Singapore or transfers of equity interests in property holding entities as part of our property market cooling measures. The proposed amendments in this bill are to ensure a fair and consistent tax treatment when such purchases or transfers are made through trust. We do not expect ABSD trusts, ACD trusts, and the imposition of stamp duty on the renunciation of a trust property to affect Singapore's position as a wealth management hub. Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move.
Any clarifications? Mr. Leong?
Deputy Speaker, thanks. And I thank the SMS for replying to my questions. I'd like to make two clarifications. One is, my understanding is that in the past, before 9th May 2022, the ABSD is not collected from trusts that do not have identifiable beneficiaries. If that is the case, if my understanding is right, can I have the number of trusts who have taken advantage of these ABSD loopholes? If the number is available, I would like to have it. If not, another time would do. Okay. Secondly is that with regards to my point about Singapore being a place that favors the rich, of course, it's a matter of, can be a matter of opinion, but I asked the SMS, if you have the following characteristics inside the tax system, do you consider it favors the rich or not? Okay, 1, no estate duty. 2, low personal income taxes, even at 22% or 24% after the revision this year after the budget. The effective income tax is actually lower than that. Of course, if you are very rich, you have an income of $5 million, you may be very close to the 24%. But our sliding income tax structure means that the effective tax rate is actually lower than the highest income tax rate. So generally, our personal income tax is very low. So third, no capital gains tax. 4, no tax on interest. 1 layer of tax on dividends only, which is quite extraordinary compared to other countries. So with all this, can we still say that our system is one that favors the rich? Thank you.
SMS.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam, we do not have data on the number of property transfers that have taken place through trusts where there is no identifiable beneficiary owner before the 9th of May 2022. But as I said earlier in my response, I thank members for their support. So now that we have, if Parliament approves this bill, with the amendments moving forward, this is something that therefore we will be able to track, we'll be able to impose to ensure that the ABSD and the ACD are collected, whether it is done directly or through trust. I do not wish to veer into a separate debate about the tax system in general, because this debate today is on the second reading of the Stamp Duties Amendment Bill. So we'll focus on the contents of the bill. But maybe just to reiterate, to assure Mr. Leong and also members of the House, that if you look at our tax and benefits system as a whole, so rather than pick and choose individual items, if you consider the tax and benefit system as a whole, where taxes are paid, benefits are given, reallocations are done, Singapore's system is one which is fair and progressive. Why? Because everybody contributes, but those who earn more, those who have more will contribute more. Those who have less, those who are more vulnerable to lower income, they will receive more benefits and more help. That, to me, is what a fair and just society is about. Thank you.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as are of the opinion, say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Stamp Duties Amendment Bill.
Committee stage, what day?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to report that the bill has... Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill.
The question is that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill. As many as of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that clauses 1 to 10 stand part of the bill. As many as of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bill to be reported. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to report that the bill has been considered in committee and agreed to without amendment.
Third reading, what day?
Now, Madam, I beg to move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. As many as of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Stamp Duties Amendment Bill.
Leader.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that at its rising today, Parliament do stand adjourned to a date to be fixed.
The question is that at its rising today, Parliament do stand adjourned to a date to be fixed. As many as are of that opinion, say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that Parliament do now adjourn.
The question is that Parliament do now adjourn.